Colorado Territory, 1871. The sun cast long shadows across the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Liam Sawyer stood at the edge of his property, surveying the untamed wilderness that had become his home. At 24, he'd already spent half his life in these mountains, learning their secrets, surviving their harshness. His lean, muscular frame bore witness to years of hard labor, while his clean-shaven face and bright blue eyes retained a youthfulness that belied the weight he carried. "No place for soft things out here," he muttered to himself, a mantra inherited from his father. The old man had died 2 winters back, leaving Liam with a small cattle operation and a philosophy that had served as both shield and prison. In the mountains, a man survived alone. Attachments were weakness. Love was a luxury afforded to those in gentle places, not men who battled nature daily for their existence. Liam adjusted his worn Stetson and mounted his horse. The cattle needed moving to higher pasture before the summer heat scorched what little grass remained in the lower meadows. Work never ended on a mountain ranch, and that suited him fine. Work filled the silence, kept thoughts of loneliness at bay. As he rode, he caught sight of his small cabin, sturdy logs and a stone chimney, built by his father's hands. It was shelter, nothing more. Not a home. Homes were for families, and Liam had long since convinced himself he had no need for such complications. The mountains were enough company. They didn't leave like his mother had when he was just 8, unable to bear another harsh winter. They didn't die like his father, stubborn to the end, refusing the doctor's help until pneumonia had claimed him. No, Liam needed nothing but his cattle, his horse, and the silent mountains. At least, that's what he told himself as he rode toward town for supplies, ignoring the hollow feeling that echoed through his chest on quiet nights. Denver was growing faster than anyone could have predicted after the war. New buildings sprouted like spring weeds, bringing with them the promise of civilization creeping ever closer to the frontier. Liam avoided the city when possible, preferring the small settlement of Pine Creek for necessary supplies. The stagecoach arrived in Pine Creek just as Liam was loading grain into his saddlebags. He paid it little mind until a commotion drew his attention. The driver was arguing with a young woman dressed in a fashion Liam had only seen in newspaper illustrations, a fitted traveling dress of deep blue, with delicate buttons and lace trim that spoke of Eastern wealth and city life. "I'm sorry, miss, but there ain't no Carlton House in Pine Creek," the driver insisted. "Denver's the closest place with proper accommodations." "But my uncle's letter clearly stated Carlton House, Pine Creek," the woman replied, her voice carrying a refined accent that immediately marked her as an outsider. "The next stage isn't until tomorrow. What am I to do?" Liam found himself studying her despite his better judgment. She couldn't have been more than 20, with honey blonde hair pinned carefully beneath a small hat. Her face, flushed with frustration, possessed a natural beauty uncomplicated by cosmetics. She looked hopelessly out of place amidst the dusty wooden buildings and weathered faces of Pine Creek. Mrs. Wilkins, the shopkeeper's wife, took pity on the girl. "Carlton's place is up near Sawyer's ranch, miss. It's no house, though, just a cabin. Your uncle must be Thomas Carlton, the surveyor." "Yes, Thomas Carlton, that's him. He's been gone these 3 weeks. Said something about mapping the northern territories." The young woman's face fell, blue eyes widening in distress. "Gone? But he wrote for me to come immediately. My parents." Her voice broke slightly. "They were lost in a fire. I have nowhere else to go." Liam felt an unwelcome pang of sympathy. He knew loss all too well, recognized its fresh mark on her face. Still, it wasn't his concern. He turned back to his supplies. "Stage back to Denver leaves tomorrow," called the driver. "You can wait at Wilkins' store." Mrs. Wilkins frowned. "We've no proper place for a lady to stay overnight." "I can pay," the young woman offered, her voice tinged with desperation. "It ain't about money, miss. It ain't proper, and there's no bed besides." Liam secured his supplies, determined to leave this city girl's problems behind. He had cattle to move, a ranch to maintain. Yet when he mounted his horse, he found himself unable to ride away. The hollow feeling in his chest grew stronger as he watched her struggling to maintain composure. "Carlton's place is 3 miles past mine," he heard himself saying. "I can take you there." All eyes turned to him in surprise. Liam immediately regretted speaking. What was he thinking? offering to escort a city woman. She'd be nothing but trouble. I couldn't impose, she began, but relief flickered across her features. It's on my way, Liam replied stiffly. Your uncle's cabin will be locked up, but you can wait on the porch till tomorrow. I'll bring you back for the stage. Mrs. Wilkins clicked her tongue disapprovingly. A lady can't stay alone in an empty cabin, Mr. Sawyer. The young woman stepped forward, surprising Liam with her directness. I'm Olivia Morgan, sir, and I would be most grateful for your assistance. She extended a gloved hand. Liam stared at it for a moment before awkwardly taking it. Liam Sawyer. My place is closer than Carlton's. You can stay in my father's old room tonight. I'll bring you back tomorrow. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. What was he doing, inviting a stranger, a city woman no less, to his home? It violated every principle of independence he lived by. Yet the gratitude in her eyes made it impossible to retract the offer. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. I promise I won't be a burden. Liam merely nodded, already calculating how quickly he could return her to town. One night. He could endure one night of disruption to his solitude. He helped load her trunk onto his pack horse, ignoring the knowing looks from townspeople. It wasn't like that. He was simply doing what any decent man would do, nothing more. The ride to his ranch was uncomfortable in more ways than one. Miss Morgan was clearly unaccustomed to riding horseback for any distance. She sat stiffly behind him, her hands barely touching his sides until the first steep incline forced her to grip him more firmly. I'm sorry, she said, her voice close to his ear. I've never ridden like this before. Just hold on, he replied. Trail gets worse before it gets better. They rode in silence for a while, climbing steadily into the foothills. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him. What brings a city girl to Pine Creek? Your uncle couldn't meet you in Denver? He felt her sigh against his back. My parents died 6 weeks ago. Our home in Boston was lost in the fire, along with everything we owned. Uncle Thomas is my only living relative. His letter arrived just as I was facing destitution. The simplicity of her explanation struck Liam. No dramatics, just straightforward facts delivered with quiet dignity. He'd misjudged her. I'm sorry about your parents, he offered awkwardly. Thank you. And you? Is it just you at your ranch? Yes, he answered, the single word carrying the weight of years of solitude. That sounds very lonely, she observed softly. I prefer it that way, Liam replied, more sharply than intended. The mountains don't need conversation. She fell silent after that, and Liam was grateful. The last thing he needed was a city girl's pity. When they arrived at his cabin, Olivia's eyes widened at the view. The ranch sat on a plateau overlooking a valley, with the snow-capped peaks rising in the distance. Even Liam had to admit it was a sight that never grew old. It's beautiful, she breathed, like something from a painting. Liam helped her down from the horse, trying to ignore the way her hands felt on his shoulders. It's just land, he said dismissively. Come on, let's get you settled. The cabin was sparse but clean. Liam showed her to his father's old room, untouched since the man's passing. It's not what you're used to, he warned. Olivia surveyed the simple furnishings with a small smile. After weeks in boarding houses following the fire, this looks like paradise, Mr. Sawyer. Thank you. Liam nodded uncomfortably. I need to move the cattle. Will you be all right here alone? Of course. May I help with dinner when you return? It's the least I can do. The offer surprised him. You cook? A shadow crossed her face. Our cook taught me the basics before I was sent to finishing school. I'm not accomplished, but I won't poison us. Despite himself, Liam felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Reassuring. There's provisions in the pantry. I'll be back before sundown. As he rode out to the herd, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully ordered existence had just been disrupted in ways he couldn't foresee. One night, he reminded himself, tomorrow she'd be gone, and things would return to normal. The hollow feeling would come back, but at least he'd have his peace. When Liam returned hours later, smelling of cattle and dust, he was greeted by the unfamiliar scent of fresh bread. He paused at the door, suddenly aware of how long it had been since the cabin had smelled like anything but coffee and bacon. Olivia stood at his stove, her fine dress protected by an old apron she must have found hanging on a peg. She'd pinned up her sleeves and loosened her hair, which now hung in a simple braid down her back. The transformation was striking, from city lady to frontier woman in a matter of hours. I found flour and lard, she said by way of greeting. The bread's not as good as I'd hoped, but the stew should be edible. Liam stood awkwardly in his own doorway, unsure how to respond to this domestic scene that had materialized in his absence. You didn't have to cook. I wanted to earn my keep. She gestured to the wash basin. There's warm water if you'd like to clean up. The meal was simple but better than anything Liam had eaten in months. They ate in relative silence until Olivia finally spoke. How long have you lived here, Mr. Sawyer? All my life. My father built this place before I was born. And your mother? Liam tensed. Left. Couldn't handle frontier life. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. He pushed away his empty plate. I'll bring you to town first thing tomorrow. Stage leaves at noon. Olivia looked down at her hands. What if my uncle doesn't return soon? I have some money, but not enough for a prolonged stay in Denver. That's not my concern, Liam replied, then immediately regretted his harshness when he saw her face fall. I mean, I'm sure arrangements can be made. Mrs. Wilkins might know when he's expected back. Of course. Olivia stood and began clearing the dishes. I don't mean to burden you with my problems. Liam watched her move about his kitchen, bringing order to a space that had known only functional neglect for years. Something twisted in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name and didn't want to examine. As darkness fell, a sudden mountain storm rolled in. Rain pounded against the roof, and lightning illuminated the cabin in brief, stark flashes. Olivia jumped at a particularly loud thunderclap. Storm season, Liam explained. They blow through quick this time of year. It's rather magnificent, she replied, moving to the window. In Boston, buildings block most of the sky. Here, it's as if nature is putting on a performance just for us. Liam joined her at the window, careful to maintain distance. My father used to say storms remind us how small we are, that we don't control anything that matters. That's a rather bleak outlook. He was a realist. Olivia turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. And you? Are you a realist too, Mr. Sawyer? The question caught him off guard. In the flickering light of the oil lamp, her eyes seemed to see right through his carefully constructed barriers. I'm a survivor, he answered finally. Out here, that's all that matters. Is it? She challenged gently. Is surviving really enough? Before he could form a response, a deafening crack split the air as lightning struck somewhere nearby, followed by the frightened bellowing of cattle. Liam was at the door instantly. The herd, he said, reaching for his slicker. Lightning spooked them. They'll break through the fencing if I don't calm them. I'll come with you, Olivia offered, already reaching for her cloak. Don't be ridiculous. Stay here where it's safe. But she was already pulling on boots she'd found, his mother's old pair, he realized with a jolt. 2 people will be more effective than 1. I may be from Boston, Mr. Sawyer, but I'm not helpless. Liam didn't have time to argue. The cattle were his livelihood. If they scattered into the mountains, he could lose half his herd by morning. Stay close and do exactly as I say, he ordered, handing her a slicker. Together they rushed into the downpour. The rain was coming sideways now, driven by fierce wind. Liam could hear the cattle before he saw them, their panicked movement a dangerous rumble in the darkness. He grabbed a lantern from the barn and handed Olivia a stick. Make noise, but stay behind me, he shouted over the storm. We need to turn them back, toward the corral. What followed was a chaotic hour of shouting, splashing through mud, and narrowly avoiding charging cattle. To Liam's surprise, Olivia followed his lead without complaint, her city upbringing nowhere evident as she helped herd the frightened animals. When one broke away toward the cliff edge, she reacted instinctively, cutting it off and driving it back toward the others. By the time they had the cattle secured in the corral, they were both drenched and exhausted. Liam found himself reassessing everything he'd assumed about Olivia Morgan. No city girl he'd ever heard of would wade through mud and manure in the pouring rain without a single complaint. They trudged back to the cabin, where Liam stoked the fire to a roaring blaze. You should change before you catch your death, he said, suddenly aware of how her soaked clothing clung to her slender frame. Olivia nodded, shivering too hard to speak, and disappeared into the bedroom. When she emerged, she was wrapped in a quilt, her wet clothes presumably hanging somewhere to dry. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, still damp, but beginning to curl as it dried. That was exhilarating, she said, surprising him with a smile as she settled near the fire. Terrifying, but exhilarating. Liam, who had changed into dry clothes himself, stared at her in disbelief. You could have been trampled. But I wasn't. Her eyes reflected the dancing flames. I helped, didn't I? Yes, he admitted reluctantly. You did. Then it was worth it. She pulled the quilt tighter. I've spent my whole life being proper, doing what was expected. Tonight, I did something real, something that mattered. Liam poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected warmth through him that had nothing to do with the hot beverage. Why did you really come out west? He asked quietly. There must be relatives or friends in Boston who could have taken you in. Olivia stared into her cup. After my parents died, I discovered we were deeply in debt. My father had made poor investments. The fire was actually a blessing of sorts. The insurance paid his creditors. But there was nothing left for me. She looked up, her expression resolute. I could have become a companion to some wealthy widow or married whichever suitor offered security. Instead, I chose freedom. Freedom? Liam echoed. Most would call the frontier the opposite of freedom for a woman alone. Perhaps. But here I can reinvent myself. In Boston, I would always be poor Olivia Morgan, the once promising debutante reduced to dependency. Her voice grew stronger. I'd rather face honest hardship than gilded pity. Something shifted in Liam's perception of her. The determination in her voice resonated with his own stubborn independence. For the first time, he wondered if they might understand each other after all. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin, something had changed. As they talked into the night, Liam found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone, about his father's gruff wisdom, his mother's abandonment, the loneliness of the years since. In turn, Olivia spoke of her sheltered upbringing, her secret dreams of adventure, the suffocating expectations of Boston society. When they finally retired for the night, Liam lay awake, troubled by unfamiliar emotions. In just one day, this woman had disrupted the careful isolation he'd built around himself. Worse, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted her to leave tomorrow. Morning brought clear skies and difficult decisions. As they rode toward town, Liam struggled with thoughts he'd never expected to have. Olivia sat behind him, her presence already feeling strangely familiar. They arrived in Pine Creek with an hour to spare before the stage. Mrs. Wilkins greeted them with raised eyebrows, but refrained from comment. Any word on Thomas Carlton? Olivia asked hopefully. Mrs. Wilkins shook her head. Not expected back for at least a month, maybe more. These surveying jobs take time, especially up north. Liam watched Olivia's face fall, saw the calculation in her eyes as she mentally counted her limited funds. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. I need help at the ranch. Both women turned to him in surprise. The cattle need tending, and there's the garden my father let go to seed. I can't manage it all alone. The words tumbled out, a transparent excuse that fooled no one, least of all himself. You could stay until your uncle returns. Room and board, plus a small wage. Mrs. Wilkins looked scandalized. Mr. Sawyer, a single woman cannot live under the roof of an unmarried man. It simply isn't done. She can stay in the old cabin, Liam countered. My father built it before the main house. It's small but sound. Olivia's eyes widened. Are you serious? You'd employ me? Liam nodded, unable to articulate why this suddenly seemed so important. You handled yourself well during the storm. The mountains require practical people, regardless of where they come from. Mrs. Wilkins pursed her lips. It's still highly irregular. I'll take it, Olivia said firmly. Thank you, Mr. Sawyer. And so Olivia Morgan missed the stagecoach, choosing instead to return to Liam's mountain ranch, a decision that would change both their lives irrevocably. The old cabin was indeed small, just one room with a stone fireplace, but Olivia transformed it within days. She cleaned years of dust, hung curtains fashioned from flour sacks, and arranged wildflowers in a cracked jar. Liam found himself making excuses to check on her, bringing supplies she hadn't requested, lingering longer than necessary. Despite Mrs. Wilkins' predictions of scandal, their arrangement settled into a rhythm of mutual respect. By day, Olivia tended the revived garden and learned to cook on a wood stove. In the evenings, they often shared meals, first at his cabin, then increasingly at hers as she made it more habitable. 2 weeks after her arrival, Liam returned from checking fence lines to find Olivia kneeling in the newly planted garden, her face flushed with exertion, hands deep in the soil. She'd abandoned her city dresses for a simple skirt and blouse, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth. The transformation was complete. She looked as if she belonged there, as if she'd always been part of this landscape. "The beans are coming up," she called when she spotted him. "And I found wild strawberry plants along the creek." Liam dismounted, oddly pleased by her enthusiasm. "My mother tried growing strawberries. Never took. She planted them in the wrong spot. They need morning sun, but afternoon shade." Olivia stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "I hope you don't mind that I moved some of her flowering bulbs. They were too crowded." "I didn't even know they were there," Liam admitted. "Garden was just weeds as long as I can remember." Olivia smiled. "Well, now it's food. Though I saved a corner for flowers. A home should have something beautiful that serves no purpose but joy." The word home caught Liam off guard. In just 2 weeks, Olivia had begun to make this harsh mountain property into something more than a place of mere survival. It unsettled him, yet he couldn't deny the comfort her presence brought. That evening, as they shared a stew made with vegetables from her garden, Olivia asked about his cattle operation. "How many head do you run?" 57, he answered. "Not enough for a proper ranch, but they're good stock. I sell most of the calves each fall." "And that sustains you?" Liam hesitated. "Barely. There's better grazing land north of here, but it would mean building new fences, a new cabin eventually. Too much work for one man." "What about a partner?" "Surely other ranchers would see the opportunity." "Partners complicate things," Liam said flatly. "My father tried that once. Ended with a dissolution agreement and bad blood." Olivia considered this. "Perhaps you simply had the wrong partner." The implication hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging it directly. Yet from that evening forward, something shifted in their relationship. Olivia began asking more questions about the ranch operations, offering suggestions that Liam initially dismissed but gradually came to appreciate. A month into her stay, word arrived that Thomas Carlton had extended his surveying job indefinitely. The news should have disappointed Olivia, but Liam noticed she took it in stride. By then, she had become indispensable, not just for her work, but for her company. The hollow feeling that had plagued him for years had receded, replaced by a warming anticipation of their shared evenings. Summer progressed, bringing with it new challenges. A bear began troubling the cattle, killing a calf. Liam spent days tracking it, reluctant to leave Olivia alone for long. "I'll be fine," she insisted, loading the shotgun he'd taught her to use. "I'm more worried about you hunting that bear alone." Her concern touched him more than he cared to admit. "I'll be careful," he promised. On the 3rd day of tracking, Liam finally cornered the bear in a canyon. The confrontation was brief but violent. He managed to kill the predator, but not before it left its mark, 3 deep gashes across his left shoulder and arm. He made it back to the ranch by nightfall, lightheaded from blood loss. Olivia's scream when she saw him slumped in the saddle was the last thing he heard before darkness claimed him. He awoke to pain and the sensation of cool hands on his fevered skin. Through blurred vision, he saw Olivia's worried face as she cleaned his wounds with whiskey. "Stay with me, Liam," she urged, using his first name for the first time. "Don't you dare leave me alone out here." He tried to reassure her, but could only manage a groan as she stitched his wounds with steady hands. Later, he learned she'd dragged him into his cabin alone, somehow managing his deadweight despite her slender frame. For 3 days, infection raged through his body. Olivia never left his side, cooling his fever with wet cloths, forcing broth between his lips, changing the dressings on his wounds. In his delirium, he spoke truths he'd never intended to share. How much he hated the loneliness, how her arrival had awakened something he'd thought long dead, how terrified he was that she would eventually leave. When the fever finally broke on the 4th day, Liam woke to find Olivia asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand resting on his arm. The simple intimacy of that touch affected him more deeply than he could express. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. She startled awake, relief flooding her features when she saw clarity in his eyes. "Thank God," she breathed. "I was afraid I would lose you." "Why?" The question encompassed more than his survival. Olivia's hand tightened on his arm. "Because I've come to care for you, Liam Sawyer. More than I should, perhaps." The admission hung between them, fraught with possibility. Before Liam could respond, someone pounded on the cabin door. Reluctantly, Olivia went to answer it. "Mr. Carlton," her surprised voice carried to the bedroom. "You're back." Liam's heart sank. Thomas Carlton had returned, and with him, the reality that Olivia had never intended to stay permanently. She had a family, a purpose beyond this temporary arrangement. He'd been a fool to think otherwise. With effort, Liam pulled himself upright as Olivia led her uncle into the bedroom. Thomas Carlton was a weathered man in his 50s, his surprise evident as he took in the scene. When they told me in town my niece was staying at Sawyer's ranch, I feared the worst, he said bluntly. Appears those fears weren't entirely unfounded. It's not what you think, Uncle, Olivia explained quickly. Mr. Sawyer was injured hunting a bear. I've been tending to him. And before that, Mrs. Wilkins said you've been out here nearly 6 weeks. Mr. Sawyer kindly employed me when I learned you were away. Olivia's voice remained steady. He's been a perfect gentleman. Carlton looked skeptical, but nodded. Well, I'm back now. Gather your things, Olivia. My cabin's not much, but it's proper for you to stay with family. Liam watched Olivia's face, searching for any sign that she might refuse. But she nodded, the perfect picture of obedience. Of course, Uncle Thomas. Just allow me to ensure Mr. Sawyer is comfortable first. After Carlton stepped outside to wait, Olivia turned to Liam. I can't leave you like this, she said softly. You're still weak. I managed alone before you came, Liam replied, hating how cold his voice sounded. I'll manage again. Hurt flashed in her eyes. Is that truly what you want? It wasn't, not remotely, but Liam's old fears resurfaced with Carlton's arrival. People left. They always left. Better to hasten the inevitable than prolong his suffering. You should be with your family, he said instead of answering directly. Olivia straightened, her expression closing. Very well. I'll send someone from town to check on you tomorrow. She gathered a few personal items she'd brought to care for him. Goodbye, Liam. He said nothing as she walked away, taking with her the light that had briefly illuminated his solitary existence. The following weeks were the darkest Liam had ever known. His body healed slowly, but the emptiness Olivia had temporarily filled yawned wider than before. He threw himself into work despite his injury, driving his body to exhaustion each day in hopes of dreamless sleep. It never came. Instead, his nights were haunted by memories. Olivia in the garden, by the fire, facing down frightened cattle in a thunderstorm. Her laugh, her determined spirit, the way she'd transformed his harsh existence into something approaching joy. A month after she left, Liam rode to town for supplies. He'd avoided Pine Creek since Olivia's departure, unwilling to face the possibility of seeing her. But necessity finally drove him to make the journey. As luck, or fate, would have it, he encountered her almost immediately. She was leaving the general store as he approached, arms full of packages. She looked different, thinner, somehow diminished despite the fine new dress she wore. When she saw him, she froze. Liam, she said softly. Miss Morgan. He touched his hat, then immediately regretted the formality when hurt flickered across her face. How are you settling in with your uncle? Well enough. He's been very kind. She hesitated. And you? Your arm. Healing, he replied shortly. Ranch keeps me busy. An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Olivia gestured to her packages. I should go? Uncle is expecting me. Liam nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. As she moved away, something broke inside him. Olivia, he called after her. She turned, hope and wariness warring in her expression. The garden, he said lamely. Your strawberries are bearing fruit. A small, sad smile touched her lips. I'm glad something of mine remains. Before he could respond, Thomas Carlton emerged from the post office. Ah, Sawyer, he greeted. Good to see you up and about. Olivia told me how that bear nearly did you in. Liam nodded stiffly. Mr. Carlton. Actually, I've been meaning to speak with you. Carlton glanced at Olivia. Why don't you go on ahead, my dear? Mr. Sawyer and I have some business to discuss. After Olivia reluctantly departed, Carlton's demeanor changed. I'll be direct, Sawyer. I don't know what happened between you and my niece during her stay, but she hasn't been the same since she left your ranch. Liam tensed. Nothing improper occurred. Carlton waved this away. I'm not accusing you. I'm observing that my previously vivacious niece now moves like a ghost. She does her chores. She's unfailingly polite, but there's no life in her. He fixed Liam with a penetrating stare. She misses that damned mountain of yours. Or perhaps it's the mountain's owner she misses. Either way, I find myself with a deeply unhappy young woman on my hands. Liam's heart hammered in his chest. What are you saying? I'm saying, Sawyer, that if you care for my niece, you should do something about it before she withers away entirely. Carlton adjusted his hat. That's all. Good day to you. The revelation that Olivia might be as miserable as himself shattered the last of Liam's defenses. All the justifications he'd constructed for pushing her away suddenly seemed hollow and self-serving. That night, Liam made a decision. The next morning, he rode not toward his ranch, but to Carlton's cabin. He found Olivia hanging laundry, her back to the approaching hoofbeats. If you forgot your lunch again, Uncle Thomas, I swear I'll. She turned and stopped mid-sentence when she saw Liam. What are you doing here? Liam dismounted slowly, suddenly uncertain. I came to ask you something. Wariness crept into her expression. Yes. Do you remember when you asked if surviving was enough? He took a step closer. You were right. It isn't. Not anymore. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly suppressed. What are you saying, Liam? I'm saying I was wrong to let you go. He took a deep breath. I've spent my life believing that attachment only leads to pain, that being alone was safer. Then you came, and you made me question everything I thought I knew. Olivia's hands twisted in her apron. And what conclusion did you reach? That I'd rather risk heartbreak than live without you. The words emerged rough with emotion. I love you, Olivia Morgan. I think I have since that first storm, when you faced down scared cattle without a second thought. Tears welled in her eyes. I love you too. But I won't be where I'm not wanted, Liam. You sent me away. I was scared, he admitted. Everyone I've ever loved has left. I couldn't bear it if you did too. So you made me leave first, she concluded softly. To protect yourself. Liam nodded, ashamed. I was a coward. But I'm here now, asking you to come home, if you still want to. Home, she repeated, the word weighted with meaning. To the ranch. To me, he clarified. As my wife, if you'll have me. Olivia's breath caught. Are you certain? Marriage is a commitment neither of us can easily escape out here. I've never been more certain of anything. Liam closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I don't want to escape. I want to build something with you. A real home, a family, a future. The ranch I've been too afraid to expand. The north pastures I've been too cautious to develop. All of it with you. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Liam Sawyer. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise sealed under the vast Colorado sky. When they finally parted, Liam rested his forehead against hers. Your uncle might have something to say about this. Olivia laughed, the sound like music after so much silence. Uncle Thomas told me this morning he was tired of my moping and suggested I ride over to see your strawberries. I think he'll approve. 2 weeks later, they were married in Pine Creek's small church. Mrs. Wilkins, who had initially disapproved of their arrangement, wept openly as they exchanged vows. Thomas Carlton gave the bride away with evident satisfaction, and the entire town celebrated the union of the mountain cowboy and his city girl. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, their ranch now, Liam carried Olivia across the threshold of the main cabin, which no longer felt like merely shelter. With her in his arms, it had finally become a home. What are you thinking? Olivia asked as they stood together by the window, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Liam pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. That my father was wrong. The mountains don't just remind us how small we are, they show us how much bigger we can become when we're not alone. Olivia smiled up at him. And we'll never be alone again. Never, Liam promised, sealing the vow with a kiss. In the years that followed, the Sawyer Ranch flourished. They expanded north as Liam had dreamed, building a larger home when their first child arrived, then adding rooms as 3 more followed. The garden grew to feed their expanding family, strawberries and all. Occasionally, Olivia would receive letters from Boston, reminders of the life she'd left behind. She would read them by the fire, then look around at the home she'd built with Liam, at their children playing, at the man who had learned to love despite his fears, and feel nothing but gratitude for the storm that had once driven her to shelter in a mountain cowboy's cabin. For Liam, the hollow feeling never returned. In its place grew a certainty that had once seemed impossible, that love, far from being a luxury ill-suited to the harsh frontier, was in fact the very thing that made survival meaningful. Together, They had transformed existence into living, proving that even in the wildest places, the human heart could find its home.